Everybody, if you could please wrap up your conversations. Ready to roll. You ready? Almost. Okay, 30 seconds. Wrap it up if you can. Good. Okay, do you have enough to report, everybody? Looks like you're ready. You're almost ready. You're ready. Ready as you're going to be. Is you ready? In the interest of getting you out on time, may I have your attention? There, that gotcha. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know that was a short period of time to do some hard thinking on the subject and come up with a product. So we're interested in hearing from each of the tables your big ideas, what you came to, and then we'll try to distill that into some key points to share with the full group. We want to reconvene by 3, which means we leave here at like 5 of 3, and then so that we have some time to wrap up as a full group. So thank you so much for your ongoing concentration, attention, and hard work. Who's ready with their report? Okay. Yep. Keith?
Yeah. So
You have to use the mic for the...
alternately, I could use what my daughters call my crew boss voice from my Forest Service days. So it looks a bit like a wizarding newspaper, so bear with me as I turn it. So one of the threads that wove through this discussion was about the uniqueness of this as a region, that the economic vitality of this region both gives us the capacity to respond in ways that some regions don't, but also how we respond is going to be a function of how well we maintain that economic vitality. So there's a two-way thing going on there. And yet, despite having greater capacity, we seem to be lagging relative perhaps to other areas and becoming an effective regional collaborative to deal with climate issues. That may just be perception, but maybe not. That's important because even though we're reasonably certain, I think everyone in this room, about what some of the global implications are of climate change, the scope of action and likely impacts really are inherently local in many cases. And we could do with better information on the local impacts, and that could be a role for the CRI. Specifically moving to what it could be or what it should be, people were thinking sort of an incubator model or a collaborative model, something that was a safe environment for the business, NGO, academic, and government community to come together to identify shared goals and come up with practical aspects for some debate about whether we implement projects or lay the framework for projects to move forward under. Some idea that it could be a place that reframes the rhetoric about climate readiness from an incomplete or flawed cost framing to an investment framing with large payoffs that could be politically feasible but also realistic in terms of market function. With respect to governance, a lot of agreement, I think, at our table that for it to be effective, the governance model has to be not one where the academic world just reaches out and says, hand us money, but one in which real governance reflects a shared authority with the other partners in that collaboration. That it's going to come up against, in some ways, a problem with the faculty incentive system, which is not necessarily to engage in these types of research projects that don't automatically head for the refereed literature in terms of being responsive to the needs of the other people in the collaborative. On the other hand, the funding situation for a university like Berkeley, which receives 50% of its budget from the federal government in research grants, is dire enough that if ever there was a time when a certain amount of money could change faculty culture in terms of how you allocate your time, this would be the time to show some green. So it's a very timely place, and that could be reinforced with leadership right at the top of the institutions. The example I brought up was, you want people to work in some field, leadership at the top say, I'm investing 10 faculty positions that will address these issues. Which of the 5 places those people might reside within the academy wants to bid for them? We've used this model before to mobilize work in an area that doesn't bin out neatly, and none of this stuff bins out neatly across the deans on this campus. So get the academy competing internally to be at the front of the game and be responsive to the needs. Finally, I think just as a positive close is sort of what's an overall objective for CRA? Well, it would be, how do we be one of the places that handles this in a way that people want to be here, not flee from here? You know, how can we be the place that does it right?
Here, meaning
the Bay Area.
Yeah. Okay. Said talent might move, and that includes maybe other talent besides just business. All right, good. Very interesting. Focus on how to change academic culture in addition to some of your other thoughts. So I think we captured it all. Thank you for that report, Keith.
I'm not sure how well my group would agree with that as a summary, but I was very fast.
Was it anything to add, anybody at this table?
Yeah, I'll just add.
Can you turn the mic back on?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just thought that another positive message is that the co-benefits agenda could be emphasized. So certainly there are a lot of positive benefits that are going to come with mitigating climate change or adapting to it. And this could be a forum for trying to highlight those.
Very good. Okay, we'll add that as well. Sure, Peter.
My only comment was that all of what we're trying to accomplish could be ever so much easier and more successful if our entire civilization knew that we were serious about winning the carbon war by folding into the price of fossil fuels their social costs over time.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, who else is ready? You? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So we had very interesting discussion at our table, and we were able to distill it down to 3 kind of at the last minute. But the basic approach was, number 1, we said, well, how can CRI advocate adaptation? Specifically, how can we evaluate tools that evaluate adaptability? The Bay Area is kind of uniquely positioned in the sense that we have these very disparate communities located over a very short geographical distance. For instance, we have communities which are incredibly vulnerable to heat, for instance, located in the Central Valley, which are completely distinct from, for instance, the Sunset District in San Francisco, which generally doesn't have to worry about significant heat waves and whatnot. And so, in addition to that, we also have demographic cross-sections that basically cross-cut through all social classes, economic classes, and all of these factors kind of come into play when you want to measure exactly how adaptable individual regions are to potential extreme weather events or climate change in general. So how CRI kind of comes into the mix then is we would be able to evaluate the tools that are used for actually measuring adaptability and be able to apply them in a region which contains such a wide cross-section so that the results of this analysis could be more broadly applied in a national or international domain. So this includes assessments of building infrastructure, for instance, susceptibility of populations to smoke inhalation, for instance, heat susceptibility, and susceptibility of infrastructure to power consumption perhaps associated with heat waves. The second thing that we came up with is the idea that we want to focus on a short-term report, which kind of draws together the whole academic, industrial, and public communities. So this could be something like a Bay Area 2050 plan. Where do we envision the Bay Area being in 2050? And what can we do over the short term in order to meet those goals? And that includes things such as informing the population of what they can do in order to adapt to climate change. So something like fridge magnets or pamphlets or whatnot, which explain specific extreme weather events and how they might affect you and how you can deal with them. So for instance, flooding or drought, or how can individuals have an effect on the adaptability to these particular events. And part of what we came up with is that we don't want to discuss it so much as a climate change discussion. So we don't want to frame it in such a way that the climate change denial community would attack it, but instead say something like, okay, over the next 10 years, there's a very high probability that we're going to have one of these 100-year drought events or 100-year flood events or something like that. So we want to prepare now for that very high probability event. And so we want to contrast that then, and we want to be able to say, okay, what are the costs associated with this extreme event? So that includes both public costs in terms of fatalities, for instance, socioeconomic costs, and business costs, which might be associated with an extreme weather event. And then we want to contrast that against the costs required for actually preparing for that, in order to demonstrate that a proactive approach would have very clear advantages over basically a wait-and-see approach. And the third thing that we came up with was CRI, envisioning CRI as a form of United Nations, bringing together basically three separate communities: industry, academia, and the public sector. Envisioning these three communities as three communities which speak different languages. So being able to act as a translator of sorts and trying to communicate between different groups what their different priorities are, why those priorities are important to each of these different groups, and how a unified approach to dealing with climate change impacts can really be beneficial to all three branches of the community.
Very nice report. Thank you. Thanks so much, Paul. All right. Who else ready? Ready? Back there? All right. Okay.
So I think it's good to follow that other table because we had a lot of the same points from a general point of view. So this table was predominantly NGO and public governmental people. And our concern is motivating people to take action. And we think CRI could help primarily in developing messages to communicate to the public. Compelling stories, stories that would reach diverse communities, particularly young and Latino, which is likely to be a very large part of the Bay Area, but a multicultural message to all groups. Show both gradual changes and catastrophic changes that are likely to take place. How the frequency of events changes with climate change. So the problem that was dealt with by the first speaker, we can never say one event is due to climate change. So we have to communicate that this type of event is the sort of event you would expect. And then finally, very important to align the message with the social justice movement, that we worry about the people who tend to be in the most harm's way and the least resources to respond are the people who are living on the edge financially. And how do we adjust to that? And they also tend to be brown and black. And how do we align the message so that we get the response we need to help in all areas of the Bay? And then this is one I added. It was not really discussed, but I'm going to put it here anyway because I'm on the Ag Committee. Develop crop and pest strategies to cope with climate change, which is something I'm sure Davis is doing, Berkeley is doing, et cetera. Thank you. You want to add something?
Yeah, if I could add something. We also talked about the young people and communities of color being a source of energy and drive for getting the message out, maybe in a more effective way than the academic community might be able to do. And then also to recognize all the resources we have now. If you think 10 years from now, we'll have fewer degrees of freedom, much fewer resources. So every group feels resource constrained. You know, the state and the local governments and the business, and everybody feels like they don't have enough resources. But if we decide to look at the resources we have and pool them together, we have more resources now than we will 10 years or 20 years from now.
Okay, I wasn't taking the notes, so hold on. Yeah, we have notes. So basically, we looked at the structure of CRI, and we also took part of what that structure might be from the topic itself. So we looked at focus, funding, and time frame as three elements that CRI can look at. What is it going to do and what is it not going to do in terms of focus? Where is it going to get its core funding? And what is the time frame? So each of these, the health, the agriculture, and the business, have both short-term and long-term effects from climate change. And how is what the work of CRI does going to fit what happens now and what happens later? We also talked about the reward structure, and Alan brought up the concept of the UC Ag Extension, people who are doing research within the university structure, but then taking that research out where it is useful in communities. So how is CRI going to go and not necessarily keying off of what Keith said, doing the total published, refereed publishing tenure route, but are there other ways to be involving and paying and giving rewards to faculty and students who are participating in CRI? Is that it? Additions? Oh yeah, the policy.
Yeah, we were saying that we think CRI might want to focus on the policy levers that are actually available to actors within the state or within the local level. A lot of academic research, and I very recently came out of academia, a lot of academic research focuses on here's what we think the outcome should be and then the effects of the outcome. But within the state, you don't necessarily have the ability to get that outcome because you don't, an issue might be something that the agency has to do with the rulemaking process, or it might be a local issue or federally constrained. So we think that more attention to looking at the levers that are available to policymakers right now and examining the effects of those, rather than saying here's the change we want to see in the world and then we're going to evaluate the effects of that change. We think that's a little bit more useful to policymakers. Yeah. Focusing on what's available and what policymakers can actually do right now, rather than saying here's what we'd like to see happen.
Great, excellent work. All right, so I'll be looking for a reporter to actually summarize what we have to the large group. Do we have a volunteer, or do we need to recruit or nominate? Anybody want to speak for our entire group?
I think it should not be.
I think it should be Marissa. Mariana.
Mariana. All right, Mariana, would you do the honors?
I really do.
Great. We'd really appreciate it. So does anyone want to note any big themes that you want Mariana to emphasize in particular? And I'll make sure Todd has it all.
Well, I think both of these tables were particularly concerned about communication.
Yes.
These tables seem to be very concerned about the right incentives for people to perform within the CRI and within the universities.
Yes.
So those were the two major themes that I heard.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
How to do that cross-cultural.
I think I would say
Yeah,
strategy
cross-culture.
as opposed to incentives.
Oh, okay.
That these two tables were thinking about the business strategy for CRI.
Right. And then these two were more concerned with communication information.
Themes here was that a strong economy provides more resources for us to deal with climate change, and therefore it's important for us to ensure that we do everything we can to enhance that.
Yeah, very good. Okay, excellent. Any concluding remarks? All right, I will send you on your way. Please turn in your comment sheets at that table, or if you're heading out this way, somewhere maybe on that chair. And thank you so much for working with me today, and I look forward to the conclusion of our session.